Well, happy Tuesday, Katrina. Happy Tuesday. We are live right now. We should turn
We're
down
live
our.
with our dance music.
Yeah, that's what we've been using to prep for all this. Is we needed
Yeah,
inspirational
have a
music.
dance party.
There we go. Let me shut that off. Well, welcome everybody. Happy Tuesday, and welcome to a webinar on Ready to Hire, our strategic step-by-step guide to interviewing with Seth Daly, but honestly, even more so with Katrina Meistering. And we'll dig right in. We'll give a couple seconds for people to pop on in here, and as we do, I guess we'll kind of get started with who we are and what we're talking about today. First off, you guys have seen me before. If you've been on some of these, I've been an agent for 20 years and got into entrepreneurship through that. And then we built out a Keller Williams brokerage and got involved in some other stuff. And most notably right now, I do all of this from Austin, Texas, and my partner in crime, AKA my best hire ever, operates all this stuff out of Maryland. Katrina, thank you. And I know you're only at 100% today. You're normally at 120%, but you're only at 100% today. Is that right?
I don't know about 100%. Maybe percentage is lower, but we'll get through.
Okay. We'll make it happen. Got it. Well, thank you. And by the way, I realize we've done several of these now, and I have not on these given a shout out to another wizard behind the curtain. So shout out to Mandy as we're talking about the hiring process today and talking about talent and everything else. Shout out and gratitude for Mandy, who is behind the scenes making all this work as seamlessly as possible and putting up with our last minute edits and all that stuff. So grateful for you, Mandy. And
there's a lot of things there's a lot of people that make us look good that you might not ever meet, and we could not do most of what we do without them.
Absolutely. Okay. Hey, save the date for some upcoming webinars. We try to always get a couple ahead here so you can put these in your calendar. So May 16th, I think that's a Thursday. We're going to be talking about the power of words, how to influence action. I almost did this a few sessions back, and the schedule got crazy and it didn't happen. So I'm circling back to it. And I hope it's a topic that interests people. I think it's a little bit more murky the way that we describe it, but the reality is the words that you use have a huge impact. And so if you've ever wanted to study neurolinguistic programming or maybe stuff like Chris Voss and the art of negotiation, if that's a field that interests you at all, absolutely hop on here. We're gonna dig deep for an hour into some absolute techniques and skill sets that you want to learn and master related to the power of your words. And then Katrina, you and I are back on May 29th. What would you tell them about communications and calendars?
So calendars and communications.
Totally a sexy
better
topic.
ways to talk about this. So sexy. It's the sexiest of all the topics. But really, what does the cadence of communication with a high functioning team look like? You could actually have meetings for 40 hours a week, and that's not really practical. So what does a cadence of communication look like to get things done? And then how do you time block your calendar to allow that communication to allow yourself to focus on the top 20% of the things as much as possible?
Yeah. And here's, if you're wondering if you ought to come onto this, here's what I would say. There are tips, there are tactics that we have learned over the years to help everybody on the team, whether it's Katrina and I or people that work with us and for us and onward, to everybody can have their best schedule, but the team syncs up when it's necessary, as often as necessary, but as little as possible as well, so that everybody can kind of do their own thing. And we failed our way forward, so we'll definitely be teaching you the things we've learned over the years in that, and love to see you back there for it. Hey, put in the chat, where are you joining in from? We'd love to know where in the world you're seeing this from. I know as this is starting to get out a bit more, and there's some folks that are on Facebook watching it right now, some folks watching a StreamYard link, but I just love to know kind of where you guys in from. And there you go.
I feel like that slide should have a picture of Carmen Sandiego on it.
I think it should. I think it absolutely should.
Older millennials and Gen X will get it, but that's most of our audience. So I'm here for it.
Yes. And if you're chiming in on where you're from, we'd also love to know what about this topic is interesting for you right now. Why are you on a topic about getting ready to hire? Maybe Maybe you're licking your wounds from a hire that didn't go as well as you wanted, and you want to learn again. Maybe you're just about to hire. Maybe you're in that process right now. We'd love to hear kind of what you're looking to learn about when it comes to hiring and what some of those questions are. So throw some of those in the chat. We're going to see what we can do to get as much content covered that is directly to what you're looking for as we go along. So one of us will be monitoring the chats as best we can. Here's what we know we're going to cover today. One, we're going to cover why it is worthwhile to spend extra time figuring out a process, a proven process on how you hire. Katrina, do you remember the first couple of times we did this before a process, like just the train wreck of, I don't know, it feels right. Let's wing it. Let's try it. And I'm not going to say we haven't still done that over the years with sometimes disastrous impact, but yeah, I don't know if you remember any train wreck stories.
Oh, no. I mean, we've had plenty of train wreck stories. And to be completely honest, you can follow the process and it still might not work. It's really just upping your chances. The idea is not, are you going to get it right every time? Or are you going to get it wrong every time? It's like, how do you give yourself the best odds to get it right?
That's it, right? It gives you better odds, right? And may they ever be in your favor. Then we'll walk through the key steps. So we've kind of tried to limit it down to 7. Maybe there's more. Maybe you could consolidate it further, but we'll walk you through kind of the 7 steps that we think about, and then walk you through a few tips on how to do it effectively, and some next steps. See if there's any Q&A that we can answer questions and go from there. So, all right, you ready to dive in, Katrina?
Dive in. Here we go.
All right. So, why is it important, Katrina? Talking about the cost of a bad hire. People might not even know what does that phrase even mean. The cost of a bad hire.
So there's the tangible cost, like the person who stole quite a bit of money from us. Like that's a tangible cost that is one of our favorite horror stories. But then there's the intangible costs as well. Well, in addition to if they steal, but there's the salary, there's the amount of money that you spent training them, the time, etc. The intangible cost is what do they leave behind them? That particular hire, is she somebody who we still will find? I'm like, we'll catch something. I'm like, what? Can we trace back to when that was? Oh, right. It was during that hire's time frame. The number of things they mess up. And I think most importantly, Dave Ramsey once said, stallions won't stay in the stable with donkeys. And that always sat with me, that you might have incredible talent on your team. And the minute that you allow somebody who is a bad hire you hire them and then leave them there, you are really putting your amazing people at risk by keeping a bad one.
100%. There's 2 types of people you might lose from your world because you hire poorly. One is another coworker, another employee that is like them or me, but I'm not staying in this environment, right? What Katrina said. And then, Katrina, I don't know about you, but there's always a pain in my soul when I think about a client that we loved, that we tried to serve the best that we could, that we lost out of our world because an irreparable harm done by somebody that we had on our team. And I think that's almost the greatest fear of an agent that might be watching this, or an entrepreneur that's watching this. It's like, I'm worried that nobody else will deliver the service the way I will. There's a reason that you really want to get this hire right. We don't want to scare you too much, but the process matters.
Indeed. Absolutely. It does.
So even the right person in the wrong job can be a disaster, right? Oftentimes we see that the mistake happens because people didn't get a clear focus on what the job description was. They just hired their best friend to do something because there was great chemistry in the relationship, but so it could have been the right person, wrong job, disastrous.
And talented people can do anything.
Yeah.
The question is, should they? Can you and should you are 2 very different things. And when then this goes to the next piece where turnover is demoralizing. When talented, good people are moving from job to job to job frequently, it's almost always because it's not a job that's fulfilling who they are on the inside, how they're wired, what they're built to do. So while they get some level of fulfillment for a while, eventually it goes away because it's not what they are wired to do. So they go chasing that fulfillment. Hiring somebody who's wired to do the position that you have hired them for, you're far more likely to keep them long-term.
Yeah. And then no one succeeds alone. Your success is limited by the people you're in relationship with. And I realized as I was typing out that line, I'm like, well, you know what? There are some people that run a small enough kind of world where they might be like, I think I do succeed alone. What I'd say is if you find yourself in that spot right now, one, consider that you might have some dreams in what you want to do in business and what you want to do in life and what you want to do in travel and the impact you want to make on your community, I promise you, inside of you, there are dreams that require and benefit from the alliance of others, the enrollment of others in that. And in business, that can be called hiring an admin. In a community organization, it can be called like recruiting your friends to participate with you. But no one succeeds alone, I think, is a true mantra for those that are pursuing big lives.
Indeed. The bigger the life, the more people you need around you.
So what else? I'll let you take some of these. And
yeah. So process, we're going to talk a lot about kind of the process, but it's the idea that it's a model somebody else smarter than me came up with that creates that consistent quality, that it's taking everyone through the same steps so that I can measure them against one another on every level. And this piece about how many classes on learning to sell, how many on learning to hire. Seth, how many classes have you taken on learning to hire?
Now a lot. But when I first did, I realized I had taken so many on sales, like we all do, because that's what we think we're in. We think we're salespeople. And the first time I learned something about how to hire, it was like learning a new language. Now I can honestly say I've done a lot of them now.
Yeah, and so frequently I'll hear from people, well, I took that class. Okay,
oh, yeah.
Took that class one time. And do we really think that, I took a geometry class. I don't remember anything about how to do proofs. Like the idea is that the more that you do something, it's just like reading a book multiple times, watching a movie multiple times, you'll pick up new things. And who you bring to the process is also different each time. That I think that so often people really shortcut the process and don't give the idea that hiring people is a really incredible privilege. And it comes with, it's a mantle on your shoulders that you need to carry well, and you'll carry it much better if you know what you're doing instead of just kind of winging it.
Yeah, here's a way to think about it, everyone. Building a business is like climbing a second mountain. So you've gotten to one peak. You've for the past however many years, you've been building a sales business. Awesome. And now you're at that peak, and maybe you're very successful in that. And now you look out across the horizon, and there's another mountain out there. And that mountain requires a different set of skills to climb to the top of it. It requires the skills of hiring and leadership as opposed to simply the sales skills. In fact, in a way, Katrina, what makes us really good at sales, right? This ability of rapport building and convincing and optimism and everything else, those can actually almost be skills that we have to put on ice a little bit in our leadership and hiring journey, right? You're going to talk about, like, you want to stay neutral. You don't actually want to convince this person this is a great job for him. You want to play it cool a little bit and backpedal to make sure it is. There's actually some skills we need to set aside, and there's some new skills that we need to learn. You want to walk people through just what the 7 steps are, and then we're going to dig into them.
Yep. And so in the spirit of that second mountain, let us be your Sherpas as you climb that mountain. So first of all, who are you looking for? This is the part that I think people don't spend enough time on. They like, I need to hire an admin. So they go and they call people like, hey, I need an admin. What does that mean? What does admin mean? What are they going to do? What kind of business do you have? Who do you already have on the team? The person who's going to be the one who builds the systems might not be the same person who's going to implement the system. The person who's going to be your transaction manager very well might not be the person who is going to be the marketing person. There's just different skills in different areas that you really want to be crystal clear on who they are. Because if you're not crystal clear, you're not going to know if you have a match.
And clear on who you are, right? So that's the other factor is sometimes we'll watch somebody, they're clear on what they want somebody to do, but 6 months later, they're like, yeah, it just wasn't a good fit. And what they realize is that they had not taken the time to figure out what their core values were as a business or where they were headed. So the more clear you are on who you are and the more clear on who you are looking for, that clarity makes a huge impact in this hiring process. Otherwise, we're literally just teaching you to hire the wrong person.
Correct. You want to cast a wide net. I know we, just like we like to build our business by referral, we like to hire by referral as well. And sometimes that's not possible. So casting a wide enough net that you've got resumes from many different sources. I will often have people come to me like, I've got the perfect candidate. I'm like, okay, well, how many? Well, that's the first one. The best of one always looks really good. And is it possible that you have one candidate and they're the best? It is possible. And you're going to know for sure once you have several others to stack them up against. So then you want to screen them and take them through the process. But we're going to kind of dive into each of each step more in depth as we go.
Yeah, perfect. And just understand 3 through 7 there are really just 5 interview steps then that follow along. All right, so get clarity. What rocket ship are you on? Where are you headed? This would be like understanding what is your value proposition? What are your core values? What is your mission and vision as your organization? Even if you are a party of one inside of this business right now, getting clarity on what you are is great. I got this line from Brian Buffini. You can double your income as fast as you can double your self-esteem. This has stuck with me now for about 20 years. I love it. I think it is so powerful. But I thought at first it only applied to sales. That's the context that I heard it in. Katrina, when we rehear this line in the context of hiring, right, or in the context of the rocket ship we're building or the future vision that we are creating, it is amazing the type of talent that you attract into your world when your own self-esteem about your goals increases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the high-level talent wants to get on a rocket ship. They don't want to get on a tricycle. They want to be on, they want to know that the person that they are in business with is the person that they can strap in next to and that they're going to hit their goals. And too often people, they underplan, they underachieve. They don't think big enough of themselves. And that's really doing themselves a disservice. It's also doing the disservice to the people they're trying to hire. But if you're thinking the people who I keep hiring, they're not thinking big enough, leadership, that is really where you want to look in the mirror on that one.
Yeah. And then a way to understand when you think about who do I want is start to use this language of talent, right? So if we were having a conversation offline and you said, hey, I'm looking for a new hire. And I said, well, what level of talent are you looking at? There's really 3 types. And again, credit to Keller Williams for so much of this content. Like this is where we learn this language: potential talent, emerging talent, and proven talent. Potential talent, an individual with the attitude and perspective and skill set that I'm looking for. Just they haven't done it they don't have a track record in this position in this job, right? They have not proven it yet. In emerging talent, similar things. However, they've demonstrated success in a similar field, or think a sister industry. Maybe they did it in mortgages and they just haven't done it in real estate, or they did it in title, etc. And then proven talent is literally maybe you're rehiring in your role in your company for a director of operations, and one of the candidates was a director of operations for a team your size in another city that just moved here, or your size in the same city looking for a new opportunity. That's an example of what proven talent would look like. Katrina, do you have a perspective? Like, where do you look for one over the other? Does it vary?
I hear a lot of people who say, I want proven talent. I want somebody who knows what they're doing, who understands the industry, my industry, who understands the position, etc. I'm going to go ahead and say, I prefer emerging talent. And the reason for that is that if somebody has done the same job for another team, for another company, for another organization, they've learned a way of doing things that may be different than yours. And it's a lot easier to teach new skills and new habits than it is to undo old ones. And if I have seen over and over and over again, people who hire the proven talent, the person who's done the job somewhere else, I've seen it not work out more frequently than I see it do work out. And that is not to say that you should not hire proven talent. If somebody is in front of you, I think in that and when we talk about the process, when we talk about vetting them, when we talk about expectations, when we talk about those core values, it's actually far more important that you be on the same level on core values with somebody who's proven talent, simply because they probably come in with a little bit more of, let me come in and take over and do the things. And you want to make sure that they are doing that in a manner that you would want them to do so. I think humility also is really important with proven talent. And the final piece is just simply that if somebody is proven talent, are you bringing them into an organization where they're going to have to climb the same mountain that they just got to the top of? I think a lot about, remember, who was it? Michael Jordan, who went into Major League Baseball after he was Michael Jordan in basketball. The question is, he had already won the NBA championships. Did he really want to do what it took to win a World Series as well? Some people do, some people don't.
Yeah. And you and I haven't actually talked about this. I was reading somebody's newsletter this week, and they talked about renting an expert. If you can't afford to buy an expert, rent an expert at first, or if you aren't an expert. And sometimes I realize what we've done, Katrina, is we've brought in potential or emerging talent, and we have rented an expert, i.e. hired a coach, hired a consultant, hired somebody at a skill set that we couldn't hire, that was proven talent plus, that we came in to help speed along the learning curve of the potential or emerging talent that we've hired. And I think that's been great because it made for a good cultural fit, but it also sped along their learning and just developing those skills.
And at the end of the day, there's a question about how do you train somebody with something that you're not great at yourself. They can go find other people who do it. Like, there is no world in which we are not in a silo. There are so many different resources. If I don't know how to do something and I hire somebody, I want them to figure it out, but I don't want them to just go do the research on their own. I want them to find somebody who's doing it really, really well, find out how they're doing it, and then tweak it for my systems.
Yeah. So by the way, if you're following along here and you already know the next hire that you're going to make that this is relevant towards, put it in the chat. Love to hear kind of what is that hire. As some questions show up here, and Katrina, you can monitor the chat and bring them in as helpful. We'll go on to step number 2: fill the funnel. Cast a wide net, guys. Cast a very wide net. Or if you're into sports, we could also use the metaphor of always be building your bench. The point is, when you find a need inside of your organization, there's really 2 approaches. They're either already in your world somehow, maybe they're in your sphere of influence, maybe they're a candidate from the past, you just sort of kept on the bench as future opportunities arise. That's ideal. Or you are sort of casting a cold but wide net right now for people. For us, they follow. We cast a net through Indeed ads, and then we ask for referrals from our sphere of influence and from our allied resources or partners, maybe in the mortgage industry, title, other business owners, maybe other agents in other areas, things like that. Anything else you want to say on casting a wide net? Otherwise, also tell them if you can, like, when you look at resumes, what do you look at?
So what Seth said about a wide net, the more candidates, the better. When I look at resumes, I'm looking for a couple of different things. I'm doing maybe a 30-second review first. What is it formatted? What does it look like? Especially if I'm hiring somebody who is administrative, but really in this day and age, anybody should have a formatted resume. If they haven't taken that time to do that, what level of professionalism do they have? I actually love when I'm casting a cold net, like Indeed ads, to put some sort of a rule in there of what they need to do. When you apply, please put the letters ICFD at the beginning, and that stands for I can follow directions. That's something for an administrative person. Like, are they doing the things that you're asking them to do? Are there typos? Are there gaps in their employment? Now, gaps in employment are different depending on the generation, depending on the age range. Yep. Just data points that you're going to take in to understand what's going on. But all of it is data points. But as far as things that will rule somebody out immediately, something like a really glaring typos, or they clearly didn't put together a great resume. That's somebody who I'm probably going to pass over.
Which is crazy, because literally if somebody simply told me I don't have a resume, I might actually still move forward in a conversation. If somebody sent me the resume
it's a bad
and
resume.
The work product was miserable, that's a much harder pass for me.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Indeed.
All right. So here might be a line, right? If you're having a conversation with an allied resource, right? Somebody in the industry with you. Hey, I just want to say thank you. You've been such an advocate in helping me build my business, and I wanted to ask you for your help. We're growing. I'm always looking for talented people to add to my team. Who do you know that I should know who is? And now is when you sort of fill that in with the behavioral style that you're looking for, right? This is not where we simply give the title of the job and the pay range. It's like we're going for behavioral traits in this sort of description to people. Oftentimes, this sort of language might connect us with somebody. That person might not be the person we hire, but they might know other people, right? Because people of a similar behavior style will tend to consolidate together. So if we find somebody who's professional and fast-paced and energetic, they might not be looking for a position, but they might have a best friend who is.
And I think that this is really important, because I care a lot less about what do you know, and I care more about who you are. because I can teach knowledge, I can teach skills, I can't teach behavior, I can't teach the way that you're wired. So if I have somebody, like, let's take, for example, we have a gentleman named Thomas in our organization. Thomas is fantastic. And prior to working in our real estate business, he worked in a warehouse.
Yeah.
If I simply had been focused on what does he know how to do, we never would have hired Thomas. Instead,
Absolutely.
we were focused on who are you and how do you carry yourself? And that got us a great employee.
And by the way, you'll notice it doesn't say, who do you know that just lost their job? Who do you know that's currently unemployed? Who do you know who's unhappy where they're currently working? Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, Katrina, some of our best people, present company included, they thought happily employed at the time, right? Or mm-hmm. in some capacity. What do you notice when you tell people that we're looking, do you get the reaction of like, oh, so let me think who just lost their job that might be a good fit for you?
Yep. So that's where sometimes I won't ask. I'm not asking who do you think they might know, but like, who do you know who's really good in this world so I can pick their brain about it, or to find out who else they might know. Jason Abrams is a guy at Keller Williams in real estate, and he talks about, I think this is hilarious. You might burn some bridges doing this, but when he's looking to hire, he calls all of the people who are in that position from other organizations. And he says, hey, I would like to grab coffee. Can I grab coffee with you? And he picks their brain and he says, okay, let's talk about job description. What should the job description look like? I'm hiring this person, and if I was going to be the world's best boss, what would that look like? And what would they need to get paid? And what would the benefits look like? All right. So if I have this job at this pay with these benefits, et cetera, you think that the best talent would get that? Okay. That they would take that. Okay, perfect. Who do you know who I should call and ask them if they want to interview for the position? I thought that's hilarious. But so often people are really, they are happy. And this is where referrals come to. Full disclosure, back in the day, Seth, Alice, my husband, and I were all in a small group together.
Yep.
And it wasn't about Katrina was looking for a job. It was, I think Katrina would be a fit in our world. And it was probably a year and a half of conversations before it happened. But that's the part of building the bench.
And we see so many sides of this process that help make that happen. I don't think, had we not learned some of these skills, that we would have been able to have the confidence to even want to pursue partnering with Katrina. She was too good for what we were looking for. And I don't think you would have seen an opportunity, or that we would have connected on a business level the way that we did, had it not been for the process.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Indeed.
So speaking of the process, right, this is really where it starts. So this is the first time. So you've put out Indeed ads, or you've gotten names from referrals, et cetera. And now this is the first start. So Katrina, what do you do first with people once you get a name or you've got an Indeed ad?
Yep. So it doesn't matter if they're from Indeed or if it's a referral. Now, if it's a referral, I may call them ahead of time. But definitely if it's an Indeed ad, if they pass that check on the resume, if it is a cold source, I will send them a blanket message that says, thank you for applying. Love to schedule a call with you. Please click this Calendly link to schedule a time. Again, if they're a referral, depending on where it came from, depending on the level of communication, I may just pick up the phone and call them. But the idea with with Indeed and Calendly is, first of all, we're not going back and forth trying to find a time. My schedule is busy. Calendly can see what's available on my calendar. It also requires them to do something. There's a lot of people who, in order to continue to qualify for unemployment, you have to say that you've applied for jobs. And they have absolutely no intention whatsoever of responding. It puts the ball in their court for somebody who is a cold source.
Yeah.
But really, this piece of, this is a gut check. I may only be on the phone with this person for 2 minutes, because there's a lot that comes from the first little bit of the call. And literally the first question that I ask is, what makes you think about making a change? That is the most telling question that I find in a screening interview, because that's really where I find the victim versus accountable language that they're speaking with. If somebody says to me, oh my gosh, I can't stand the fact that my boss is emailing me on evenings and weekends, and that's my time. And I'm like, red flag, red flag, red flag. I'm in an industry that is, you might not need to work on evenings and weekends, but you better believe you're going to get emails. Or somebody who says, oh, my boss is so toxic, or the word toxic, anytime that comes up in an interview, I'm not discounting the fact that there are toxic work environments. And when somebody says that in the first 5 minutes of a conversation with you, it tells you the way that they perceive the world. On the other hand, if somebody says, yeah, I've been in this organization for 4 years and I realized that while I love the position that I'm in, there's not upward mobility. The owner is thinking about retiring in the next couple of years and there's no more growth in this organization. Those are the types of people that I want to move forward with there. We spoke about Thomas earlier. Thomas wanted to get out of a physical labor type position and into something that he could use his brain more. Like that's a good reason for somebody to want to make a change, not a victim reason.
Yeah, I love it. So, okay, so this call ends. Now I know the next thing that we're going to go to has a behavioral assessment. So what are the actions that you end this call with to set up the next appointment? And how do you tee up any sort of behavioral assessment? Obviously, we use something now called the KPA, but we also used to use the DISC, or we could use several of them. There's a reason to do some type of behavioral or personality assessment. How do you tee that up with people?
So on that phone call, they're going to fall into one of 3 buckets: yes, no, or maybe. If they're a no, the language is simple. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm just doing a bunch of these quick phone calls with people. And once I've circled through the list of folks that I have these calls with, I will get back to you. And then I end the call. Day or 2 later, I send them an email saying I've chosen to move forward with other candidates. If they are a yes, I say, well, it's been a delight to speak with you. I would love to get together in person. I will have, would you be available? Whatever. Okay. In between now and then, would you have about 45 minutes to do a behavioral assessment? Then they say yes. And then I tee up for them what they need to do. So the particular behavioral assessment that we send is one that they need to have good energy for. They need to not be distracted. They need to be in an environment where they can be uninterrupted. So having somebody over your shoulder is not a good idea, et cetera. And I tee that up for them when I send that to them. And then obviously want to make sure that they've done it prior to the interview as well. If they're a maybe, I say, same language as with the no's, except now I actually might follow up with them. And if my goal is to do behavioral assessments with 10 candidates and I get to the end and my yeses were only 5, I'm going to look at my maybes and I'm going to say, hey, was there anyone in here that I feel like deserves to have that chance at that? And then I will reach back out to them, usually just via email, and I'll ask if they have time to get together. And then I'll tee up the same thing that I said on the phone to the yeses with that email.
Yeah. And so what you're teeing up is the first in-person interview. So by and large, we do this interview in person. There was a season during COVID, or maybe if I'm making a hire that's remote, where this is by Zoom. But our goal is that this is in person. We normally budget if we were blocking on our calendar, we budget about 2 hours for what ends up being 2 distinct processes for the first interview. And the first part is sort of like, we want to understand how this person behaves, how they tick, just their personality / behavior. Those terms could be interchangeable and they could have very distinct meaning for you. And then we really also want to dig into just how they think. And so the behavioral assessment or a personality assessment really helps to go with the first part. And then we do what you would almost think of like as a traditional interview that gives us some of these answers to helps us understand how they think. So the behavioral assessment, Katrina, we talk about this process called like a validation or a verification. So you get these results and then you walk it through with them. If you knew that somebody wasn't going to be a good fit, but you've given them this assessment, what is the benefit of still sitting down with them and going through at least the first hour of this interview?
Well, first of all, if I know they're not a fit, I might make that 30 minutes. I'm not going to lie. Sure. I'm not going to dive as deep, because part of the verification process is, if you think that they are a fit, really diving into what your red flags might be and helping you gain clarity on, this person does not seem to move as fast as I might like. Let me really dive into that part of the assessment so I can determine, are we going to fit together? And if the assessment comes back and it's an administrative person and they should absolutely be a salesperson, I'm going to sit down with them and I'm going to go through it. And I'm going to, at the end, I'm going to give them the gift of saying, hey, by the way, let's look at this list of what you might be really well wired for. And all of them are sales positions. What I have is a position where you sit behind a desk all day. You don't really talk to people. You're behind a computer dealing with data. How does that sound to you? That's the type of person who says, well, that sounds terrible. and giving them the gift of, just because I have a really great friend who went to school for accounting, and he's wired to be a salesperson. And for the first several years out of undergrad, got accounting jobs and was absolutely miserable. Thought it was the work environment, thought it was all of that. It wasn't until he did one of these types of assessments that he realized it's not that these environments are wrong. It's that I'm sitting on the wrong seat of the bus. He did a lateral move within his company and was super happy. So giving them that gift of helping them to understand themselves, even if it doesn't fit, is really powerful as well. And then, by the way, if I know I go into it, if I give somebody the assessment, I'm going to go through it with them. But I'm not going to do both steps in this process. If it's a no, I might know going into it that I'm not going to go dive into step 2. I also might decide that by something that they say during the verification process. I'm not going to spend 2 hours if I can spend 1.
Yeah. I would implore everybody, if you give somebody an assessment into their behavior or personality, one, consider it practice for yourself in the process. 2, consider, building the bench in some ways, getting reps and building the bench. And also just, you're doing good for humanity when you help people understand how they're wired and what they're good at. And if you can see this as, okay, maybe it fell out of interview time and just fell into like good karma time of doing good for humanity, it's fantastic. And I'd encourage it. Then we talk about, how they think. And I think we've got a few of the questions that we tend to like on here. And the reality is there's 20 or 30 of them that we use. I just picked a few of the ones that we like the most. Any on here stand out to you, Katrina, of like, oh, I always like asking this one because here's what I get out of it?
I really like the trained well and poorly one, because that tells me if the type of manager or training that I'm going to give them, really those kind of last 3 of, am I a fit for that? So when somebody says to me, I need somebody who is going to be able to be available to me all of the time, that anytime I have a question for them, I can pick up the phone and they're available. I'm not going to be a fit for them. Chances are pretty high if you pick up the phone and call me, I'm not going to pick up. I'll call you back and I'll set aside time for you, but I'm going to need you to figure stuff out on your own. So it really helps me understand, are they a fit for who I am?
Yeah, and I love just the first 2, that combination there. I mean, how do you set goals and how do you hold yourself accountable to those goals? I find that the people that I love bringing into our world, goals, the setting of goals and accountability towards goals are not new conversations. They might not have necessarily even had it in some of the business roles that we bring them in, but they've got it in other areas of their life, right? So this isn't a business question specifically. It's just, I mean, they might say they ran marathons, right? And how do you set goals? How do you hold yourself accountable to training for a marathon? There's many different ways that they could answer these questions. They're broad enough to do that. And I'm sure we will put together a resource with some more questions in here, but here are a few of our favorites. Here's one. This question we got from Keller Williams. I think Keller Williams might have loosely borrowed it from Dan Sullivan. It's called the R factor question. But here's the general gist of it. If we were sitting here a year from now, celebrating what a great year it's been for you in this role, what did we achieve together? A brilliant question to help let somebody unpack like the role that they see themselves making in an organization, your organization, etc. Just frames up. Any comments you have, or when you've asked this question, any ahas from this one?
Really goes to think if they're thinking big, how are they thinking? It doesn't matter as much what they say and more the size of their thoughts that I'm really looking for.
Yeah. I love it. And if you want more of those questions, stay tuned until the end. You'll basically send an email or reply to this email. We'll work on getting you some of those resources. Pay attention to the intangibles. Katrina, you got a funny one that isn't even on here, but what are the intangibles that you look for when you're in this first interview with people?
Yeah. So are they early? Are they late? Excuse me. How do they interact with the person at the front desk? How do they interact with others? I actually want them to sit out with the front desk person for a couple of minutes because I want to get that person's blink on them.
Totally.
I think that especially because they're not on, so to speak. How do they interact? How quickly do they move? Seth always makes fun of me. I watched somebody leave, specifically if it's wintertime. How quickly did they put their coat on? Do they zip up their coat when they get in their car? When do they put their seatbelt on? Tells you a lot about how quickly somebody moves. And this actually came as a result of somebody who was in our world who moved very, very slowly. And as I was about to claw my eyes out because of how slowly this person moved after they'd been with us for a while, I watched them get ready to leave the office. And it was like, oh, where's my keys? And I was like, oh my gosh. So I kept watching, put a coat on, slowly zipped up, walked out, went out to the car, sat in the seat for a minute, adjusted the radio, put on the seatbelt, checked the mirrors. I'm like, holy cannoli, no wonder this, like I could have seen this earlier. So I will watch people go out to their car. Do they, and it's not bad. There's not one right way or the other. It's the how, if I am looking for somebody who is going to move fast, I can see, are they moving fast? I know personally, I get in my car and I'm buckling my seatbelt as I'm pulling out of the parking lot because I move fast. So who are they and how do they, honestly, another thing I've done before, and it's probably creepy, but I'm going to tell you anyway. If it's an administrative person, I'll sneak out and I'll look in their car. The more hot mess their car is, the less likely I am to believe they're going to be a great admin. Most admin are a little bit more organized. They're a little bit more clean. They're not the kind of person who's got like old McDonald's wrappers on their floor of their car. They're just not, unless they're kids.
I've never heard this one. Super judgy. Do not let Katrina anywhere near my car, people.
Oh, his car's terrible. Do not hire him as your admin ever.
Okay. So then we get to interview number 2. And I guess actually we should sort of make the transition. So let's go here. You've done interview number 1. You are 2 hours into a conversation with this person. And now you're setting up, if they're a good fit, you're finding a way to kind of pause and collect your thoughts, but you're really setting up, hey, we need to continue this conversation. I guess I should ask you, how do you even tee up before you start interview number 1 that there's going to be multiple interviews to this process?
I don't.
Okay.
And others might have different ways of doing things. If I tell people that there's going to be 3 or 4 interviews and then I stop at 1, I really at 1 have to tell them that I'm stopping. And as opposed to, I will let them know, I'm like, hey, our process is a little different than others. We're going to go through parts of this that you probably have never experienced in an interview process. Just know that I'm going through a series of steps that have been proven to help place the right people in the job. So instead of saying, hey, it's going to be this many interviews, these are the steps, I'm saying it's different. So now they don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
And that there's going to be multiple steps in the process.
Here's what I can say. If you're watching this, you're like, oh my gosh, you're already 2 hours in, you're going to do more. I mean, 1, we end up dedicating between interviews and our own kind of analysis and everything else. I mean, it could be, we could clock 8 hours easily on a hire, right? I don't mean 8 consecutive hours. I mean like 8 purposeful scheduled hours. I have found though,
on one candidate, not on the whole hiring process, on one candidate.
That's right. I have found this, the energy level of the right candidate, once you have spent an hour, 90 minutes, 2 hours walking through their behavior style and how they think, 1, you know them at a very deep level. 2, they feel known at a really deep level. Maybe not, I mean, it goes even deeper in the next interview, but even already this person's like, wow, you have helped me understand some things about myself. You pulled out with great questions, or you pulled out through helping me understand my temperament, my behavior style. You pulled out some great stuff out of me. And when we simply say, this has been fantastic, would you like to continue being a candidate? If so, we'll talk about the next stage. And I can't think of a time that we haven't gotten, absolutely, I'm in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And again, once you get to the end of this interview, it's the same as the screening call. Yes, no, or maybe. Yep. If it's a slam dunk, yes, schedule the next thing. You don't want to do it immediately. You want to give at least a day in between. If it's a no, then again, you can give them the gift of, hey, here's the job. Let me show you the type of person who loves this job, and this is who you are. It's just not a fit. Or you can say, hey, we'll get back to you, and then let them down easy in a couple of days or so. But maybe, again, I'll let them know I'll get back to them. But I do value my time. So I've got litmus tests of how many people. I do want to do this part with about 10 people. I want to do behavioral assessments with 10 people. But I don't want to take all 10 people to the next step because it is a huge time commitment. And I've got a lot of things on my plate. So this next step, I really want it to be 3 or 4. So again, if it's not a heck yes, I might say, hey, you know what? I will get back to you. And then I evaluate everyone after I've gone through those pieces.
And not saying that this is right or wrong, because normally this next step, and we'll kind of talk about it, but it's really it's 2 more interviews that each take about an hour. Sometimes we will do these together. Sometimes we will break these up again. And so imagine you kind of have 4 parts total. Usually when Katrina and I are hiring somebody that rises to the level of that they would maybe report to Katrina but interact a lot with me, I will often take one of these interviews. And we don't know if that's right or wrong either, but it has seemed to work well for us. So if you're in a situation where you're really not sure who should be doing the interview, should we do it as a group interview or whatever, we found group interviews don't work as well. But sometimes we'll have one of these modules. We'll have almost the grandparent in the organization, if you want to think about it that way, do the interview. But if the person's going to report to Katrina does 3 out of the 4 interviews at least. So the interview 2, the second in-person interview, which again is 2 more steps. Think of it like a timeline, right? You're talking to them in the present moment. And in this timeline, we're really going to do 2 things. We're going to go back as far in history as we can, kind of where did they come from? And then we're going to go as far into the future as we can, or 5 years-ish, of where do they see themselves going? So you're at a timeline, you're at a moment in time, and we're going to go backwards and we're going to go forwards. Do you want to talk them through this one of the, hey, where have they been? How do you go through this process?
And depending on the candidate, I might say starting from your last formal education until today. And with other candidates, especially younger ones, I'll say starting with your first real job. Because we go through last formal education. My last formal education ended when I was 28, when I finished my MBA. So if we're really talking about formal education, that I had a decade of experience prior to that may or may not be relevant. Now, if I'm 65 and my last formal education was 28, you probably don't need my job from when I was 22. Yeah. So if it is a younger candidate, I'll say starting with your first real job, and they kind of understand what that is. But what was the job? When were you there? So my first real job was I worked for a travel agency, and I did that junior and senior year of high school and all through college. And they'll give the years. And then what were the highs of that position? What were the lows of that position? And what did you learn? And again, I'm looking in here, I'm looking less for what can they do and more how do they think and how are they wired and how do they interact with others? You go through all of this and you get 4 or 5 jobs, and in all of them, the low was their boss. They didn't like their boss. Yep. What do you think their complaint is going to be about you? When the low was, I didn't get there was no upward mobility. Those are the things that subconsciously they're the limiting beliefs that they have in any organization. And you really want to look at those things. Also, if somebody says they didn't learn much or they didn't learn anything about themselves in the process, they're probably not learning based. And I really only the people in our organization have to be learning based. It's one of our core values.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, what's the role of the position? When were you there? What are the highs? What were the lows? And what'd you learn in the process? And it is remarkable to see what will walk out. Obviously, we budget an hour because for a candidate with not too many roles, this could be a 15 to 30 minute process. And for some, like we're moving fast to get it done in an hour.
And if I'm interviewing somebody for a very entry level position that they might not have had as many formal jobs, this is also where I might dig into like sports or something that they did like as a team. If they were they might not have had a job in high school because they played club and travel and rec and all of the things in softball. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the highs of being on that team, the lows of being on that team. What did you learn? There's experience outside of vocation that can be really valuable in here for a younger person. You're just going to have to dig a little deeper to get it.
Yeah. Just understand that whatever the theme you see in their highs and lows and what they learn, that is going to be a theme that years from now, they are going to tell about your organization, what it was like to work with you. And then the second part, right? Where are they going? And this one, and by the way, we put both of these on a whiteboard because this is actually how we do these, right? Katrina, I mean, they don't need to necessarily follow this exact framework, but this is, you literally color coded about like that. You draw lines, you do it vertical kind of, I mean, it looks about like this on a whiteboard when it's done. I know because at the end of an interview, Katrina will snap a picture of that whiteboard, send it to me, and that's in the person's file, right? It's there. This one, it doesn't look, we actually color code this a little bit different, but the generic question is, hey, if we were sitting down 5 years from now and I asked you, how's life? And you're like, everything is amazing. What has to happen in the next 5 years for you to be able to say that, right? That's sort of this generic prompt. And then what we end up doing is we end up kind of dividing it into different buckets, right? Some people will divide it into 4 buckets or maybe 5 or 3 or whatever, but you figure out like what are the main categories that you want to think about that in. And then you ask this series of questions, which is sort of like drilling down into the question to go from a very generic or a very surface level, I want to make X amount of money, to deeper emotional levels and impact levels and almost like this soul level of why does that matter? Katrina, you've done a lot of these. What have you learned over the years just sort of doing this interview with people?
A couple of pieces. If they're not crying, you probably didn't do it right.
That's right. And not because you yelled at them.
Not because I yelled at them. Not because, I pinched them. No, this is one, and it's a little tongue in cheek. And I would say 75% of the time, whoever I'm with does cry because it's bringing out what do they want for their life. And often no one has asked them these questions and they haven't even thought about it. This is an incredible gift. This is a gift that I do this part of the process more frequently than anything else, simply because I'll be sitting with somebody and I'll be like, I just don't know where I'm going. And I will pull over my whiteboard. If I was an action figure, my accessory would be a whiteboard. And I will put out these quadrants and I will go through this process with them and really help them figure out where do they want to go? What do they want to do? How do they want to get there? It's an incredible gift. Then from my perspective as the potential employer, I want to look at that 5-year goal and I want to know that if I bring them into my organization, I can help them get there. Now, there's some people who are very unrealistic. There's the 22-year-old who's applying for the front desk job, and in the next 5 years, they want to be a gazillionaire. Sometimes you have to take you have to think about who that person is and the experience that they have of, do they understand what life really realistically is? And what I could hear from that is that they want to have a much higher level of financial success. Now, if somebody says 5 years from now, I want to be backpacking through the Serengeti, that's all good, well and good. The question is this a position that in 5 years, when you're no longer in my world, I'm okay with that? It might be. We just hired a new person for our front desk because we hired that guy named Thomas, who I told you, we promoted him. And that position is one that I think has a shelf life of 12 to 24 months.
Yeah.
They're either going to move up in the organization or they're going to move out, because most people don't want to sit at a front desk long term. So if I'm hiring a front desk and they want to be in the Serengeti in 5 years, that's fine. But if I'm hiring somebody who's going to be a key leader in my organization, it's probably not the right fit.
Yeah. I also want to say, if you're watching this right now and you got on this webinar because you're thinking about somebody you need to hire, but while you were on this webinar, you are thinking about somebody who already works for you, somebody you have already hired, and you're having, like I am, maybe that panic attack or that oh crap moment. I've got team members that are watching this, and full disclosure and license to any of my team members. If you're watching this and you're like, hey Seth, when's the last time we did that whole 5-year journey with me? Can we get that on the calendar? Absolutely. Right. This is a great exercise. Katrina and I, when did we do this last for you, Katrina?
The last 12 months.
Yeah, I remembered cold, so I'm thinking maybe it was this past winter, but we hopped on Zoom. It took us an hour or two. There were tears, as there should be. It absolutely helped us get realigned. It helped Katrina get realigned to her goals, helped me get realigned to her goals. And I would recommend this for inside of your current organization as a way to create new realignment and synergy inside of an organization as well. It's powerful in hiring. It's very powerful in retention. Mm-hmm. This is a book. I can't believe it's only one book that we're referencing in here. When you think about this whole process that we just covered, there's a phrase of mirroring language, right? Or keyword backtracking. When somebody fills this out and you do the best you can to write the answers in the exact language that they use, you are not just getting what their goals are, but you're getting their goals in the language patterns that matter to them, the words, the phrases, the concepts that they associate with the most, right? If they say, I want freedom in 5 years, you might be like, freedom's a really weird word to use here, but it's their word. It's the word that is going to resonate the most with them. And if you can backtrack to that as often as possible, awesome. And also, this exercise allows you to step into the role of the dream manager. And if you don't know what the dream manager is, this is a great book to read. But in a way, consider it as your role as a leader inside of an organization is to help those that work with you, help those that work for you to accomplish their dreams. And if they accomplish their dreams and they're lined up with the organization will accomplish its dreams. That's the goal, at least. Anything you want to say about that book? It's been a little bit since we've looked at it.
No, I think that you summed it up perfectly.
Perfect. All right. So you've just finished the second in-person interview, and you are on the home stretch here. So vet your candidates. Anything you want to say about these three as I'm watching the time here? We'll zip along.
So with references, we go through the process of 3D. The last question that you ask, and there's a whole sheet of questions the last question is, who else do you know who has experience with Seth who might be able to give me another perspective? You ask that question of them, and then you ask that question of the next person. People are like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. The references that they give you are their fans.
Yep.
I want to look for somebody who might not be their fan, who might not be the person who's going to sing their praises. I want to look at, and I will tell you, the candidates who are the best ones are the ones where their references are like, oh yeah, no, here, let me get my phone out. You talk to this person, talk to this person, talk to this person. The candidates that haven't worked out are the ones that I've had a hard time getting more names from.
No doubt. Group interview, just think about this as like, put them together with either members of your team. Maybe they take them out to lunch. It's more social. It actually gets buy-in on two levels. It can get buy-in from the team to the person and also buy-in from the person to the team. We just find that depending on the role, it's a key part of the process. And then a defense, which I don't know if we're really covering, there might be a few questions, but basically with the defense, think about it like, what could go wrong? What could I be overlooking here? You want the black hat to be worn in the defense of talk me out of this idea of hiring this person. And that's really the role you sit on. So this was what Katrina just referenced there, right? This might be one of the questions that I would ask a reference. As Katrina's consultant and mentor moving forward, I'd like to be effective in helping her grow twice. What are some of the areas that I could help her in terms of personal and professional growth? It's amazing the types of questions I'll get with that. And then as we're watching the time, and I realize clock management poor on my part for the last couple minutes here, here's a few questions. So grab a screenshot of these. Katrina, why don't you run through these real quick? Any that stick out to you?
Most of these are things that we've discussed really throughout the process. What does their track record show? That's like, what were your roles? What highs and lows? Does this person have the knowledge, skills, track record, and culture to get the job done? Are they behavioral match, or will they have to stretch?
Not that they can't stretch, but if they have to stretch too much too often, it's not going to work out well.
Long term. Are they potential, emerging, or proven talent? And do they think in a way consistent with our organization?
Yeah. Will this role get them closer to achieving what they want? Do the references confirm or contradict what we thought about the person? Can they be successful in this role? And then I love these last two. Imagine that they fail in the first year. What might have caused it? What might have caused that based on what we now know or know now? And lastly, imagine that they are succeeding in a year, yet decide to leave. What was probably the one thing that drove that decision, and could it have been avoided? So then we get to the last interview, which is almost, we called this a big day. This is actually the job offer. What's the very first question you ask people when you sit down with them in that interview?
Hey, if I were going to offer you a job today, what would you say?
Yeah, it's an open-ended question in a way. It lets them get at anything. And honestly, you will get their objections or their thinking about that process. Mm-hmm. What I'm looking for is I would say, absolutely, I want to be in business with you people because they've now been through this process with us so often. Then we will walk them through, assuming that question is answered in the I'm excited, then we walk them through one more process where it's really a series of different prompts. So like we'll ask the question, how honest do you want me to be with you? And when we ask them that question, we've already printed out our answer, and then we read it out loud, explain it a little bit, and then we give them a chance to answer in their own words. We write it in, and at the bottom of each of these pages, we actually end up signing off on it. This is the first thing that we start to sign as a precursor to signing the job offer.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions that you want to cover on here?
No, and this is actually a great one to revisit as well. If you're finding that your communication with an employee is not going well, going back to this, the downfall of every relationship is mismanaged expectations. So going back to this, seeing what they said before, and do they need to revise it? And do you need to revise it?
Yep, I love it. I love the how do I win with you, lose with you question. That is a great question to go back to the people in your world that you care about, that it's just not working well. Or with clients, hey, how do I win with you? How do I lose with you? Because I feel like I'm losing with you right now, and I want us to win with each other. So some tips, right? We probably covered all this. I'll go through them, and Katrina, chime in as you like. One, be clear on what you want. Stay objective and neutral when you're outlining what you want, who you're looking for in a candidate. Stay curious and dig deeper. A great question to ask is, hey, what's an example of that? Tell me more. Where did that show up in your past career? Asking them to go deeper will get you much more insight. Watch their body language. Also, in a weird way, watch yours. Make sure that you're not telling. If they start talking about something that you really love and you lean into the conversation, you are no longer neutral in that. And do not use this as a time to have a conversation, right? Conversation is they tell you something about their childhood and you're like, me too. Same thing happened to me. And now you're doing what you would do in sales of your building rapport, and you're trying to actually influence what they think of you. It's the opposite in this role of staying neutral in these conversations. Katrina, you talked about number 5 a little bit earlier with different language. Why don't you take over from there?
If you want to hire top 1%, you might need to interview 100. A lot of people, I will say it is far more frequent that people don't have enough candidates than they have too many. Always be building your bench. I mean, this is where the person at the grocery store who's always doing an excellent job getting your meat might be your next admin. You never know. Waiters and waitresses make incredible salespeople, usually. And then learn to listen for the language of talent. What are they saying? Are they pushing you? Are they seeking for answers? Or are they really in that victim mode more of the time?
Yep, absolutely. Here's 2 questions that we are constantly asking ourselves that we think really recenter us in any process of hiring somebody. 1, will this person be not just successful, wildly successful next year with or without me? If you find yourself, you're like, oh, they'll be successful because I hired them and because of this organization, you might have a savior complex, right? And the second question is, if they accomplish their goals, will the team accomplish ours? It is possible that their goals are to work part-time and then to have a lot of flexibility, which is fantastic. But if that goal is not in alignment with the team's goals, they might be a great person, just a wrong fit or the wrong time inside of this organization.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Any comments there?
Yeah, I know for me as a mom, I will have other women who say, well, I want to get into real estate because it's super flexible. And there's a part of it of like, I'm hiring you so I can have more flexibility. So we just need to make sure we're in alignment on that, because I don't want to spend more time away from my kids to give somebody who works for me more time with theirs.
Yeah, I absolutely. So a few things you might want to do as you're digging deeper into this journey. Number 1, so much of this content, we owe a debt of gratitude to Career Vision. That is the Keller Williams training course. Guys, it's an amazing course. I don't care where you are in the US, it's probably nearby, or you can get a virtual version. It's way better than this. It'll put this whole little webinar to shame, and you should go take it. Number 2, and if you want to figure out where it is, reach out to Katrina or I. Number 2, the KPA assessment. If you have not taken a lot of behavioral assessments, this is just one that we know really well. We know how to validate it. It's one we're happy to reach out. So if you're a realtor partner of ours from around the US or locally, and you have not had one of these validated, reply to this email or send me an email there. And we'd love to be a resource for you and help you learn more about that for yourself. And lastly, if you want more personalized consulting, maybe this opened up a topic, you're like, I don't even know how to put this in a question in this chat, but man, I could really use some one-on-one time on this. We block out our calendar for a few of those sessions, and we'll work through what that can look like. If you want some personalized consulting on this, reach out. So you can reach out to my information is down below, and it'll be on the next slide as well. And again, save the date for some of these upcoming events. We hope to see you there. Hope you guys are getting value out of these. We will take a look at the slides here and see other questions. Here's our contact information if you want to reach out to either of us, and we'll watch the slides for just another minute or two, or I'm sorry, we'll watch the comments, see as people have questions. I see one on there. Yeah, we put together a a resource deck at the end of this, and there'll be some access to that. So stay tuned on that, or reach out. Katrina, any other questions that you see on there?
I don't think so.
Okay, guys, we hope this is helpful. Sorry, we ran a couple minutes over, and hope you got some value out of this. And if this is helpful and you're like, would you guys please do a talk on this topic or this topic? We would love, we'd love to know what would be valuable to you, to see if it fits in our wheelhouse of things we're good at talking about. We'd love to share. So we enjoy this. It's our way to give back to the community that has given so much to us, and we love doing it together. Katrina, thanks again for being on here, and thank you everybody for your time today.
All right.